and welcome to Good Game, the show for gamers by gamers. I'm Barjo.
And I'm Hex.
Quite an eclectic mix of games on tonight's show, Hex.
Yes, we have all the glitz and glamour of the NBA's legendary greats in 2K12.
Collosus in the backcourt.
The methodical strategy of Might and Magic Heroes 6 entices us with just one more turn. It's a shame we couldn't bring you Battlefield 3 this week, but we just didn't get the game in time enough to review it.
Alas, no, but it does give us more time with the multiplayer, so on hold for next week.
But before we start the show, we'd like to talk about two games which have been re-released and remastered for HD, Ico and Shadow of the Colossus.
Yes, it's become a bit of an increasing trend for older games to get jazzed up in high definition, but it's taken these two gems from Team Ico to really get me excited about one of these re-releases.
Both of these games stand tall on the piles and piles of PS2 games that were released. Hex, did you ever play Ico?
Now, I have to admit that I missed it. My first experience was with Shadow of the Colossus, so I'm sort of experiencing everything in reverse. Although, the game's creator has hinted that Shadow was actually a prequel to Ico, so maybe I'm the one that's doing it right. Anyway, both of these games have such a distinctive feel that it's easy to immediately succumb to the mood and the magic of this world.
Ico starts very mysteriously, with your character, a small boy, being thrown into a prison for the good of the village. Something to do with the horns on his head. After breaking free from a cocoon-like cell, you stumble upon Yorda, a strange girl who's trapped like you are. She quickly becomes your companion, and it's up to the two of you to find a means of escaping this weird and deadly place you're trapped in.
It's so beautiful, Barjo, the way you lead Yorda around by the hand, you instantly feel protective of her. And she's always been constantly pursued by these weird black phantoms, so you're always on alert with a big stick at the ready. You know, within minutes of starting this game, I completely forgot that it's actually about 10 years old now. It just pulls you right in.
Yeah, and even without the HD facelift, I think you could just sit down and play this game as if it was brand new and you'll just fall in love with it. And I think it's largely due to that original artistic vision. All the environmental puzzles have such intuitive solutions, and that sound is so atmospheric.
Released back in 2001, Ico obviously wasn't developed for huge TVs. In fact, it was originally released in 512 by 224 resolution, so I'm surprised how great it looks in 1080p. I mean, you can see a few rough edges, like some crappy textures and a bit of a low polygon count, but it just doesn't matter. There's just way more clarity overall.
Yeah, and seeing this on a bigger TV in HD just makes it more immersive because you get a sense of that scale they were trying to achieve. And the addition of surround sound doesn't hurt either. But let's move on to Shadow of the Colossus.
Again, such a beautiful tale, Barjo, with such an expansive environment that fills you with wonder. Basically, this is a game of boss fights, and I remember what some of those giant colossi used to do to the PS2, and it's just so awesome to play this now without any nasty slowdown or shuddering. The frame rate is just nice and consistent now.
You know I like a good frame rate, Hex.
Yeah, I know.
They seem to have fixed the bugs too and the glitches which were in the original game, and it's just so thrilling and intimidating climbing these giant bosses and attempting to find their weak spots and climb all over them, and it's so heartbreaking when you get right to the top of one and then just fall off before delivering a single strike.
And your horse Argo...
Agro.
Is it? Oh, Argo is Xena's horse. Well, anyway, it's such a great character too, not just a means of transportation, and becomes quite integral to taking down some of these colossi. And you become quite attached to her.
You do, and you know, when you're fighting these colossi, you actually start to feel quite sad that you're killing something so beautiful. So this game just creates this wonderful conflict, and this game and Ico, they're both ones which will stay with you long after you finish playing them. I want to see more of these great old games remastered, Hex.
Yeah, and it's nice to see that they've been handled with such care. I mean, there's nothing shoddy about the way this has been remastered, unlike Resident Evil 4 HD, which really felt quite rushed and underwhelming.
Resident Evil 4 is still such an amazing game, but yeah, that HD update was more like a sloppy PC port. That game deserves better treatment. What a missed opportunity. It's sad to see a publisher treat it more as a cash-in as opposed to a loving restoration for posterity.
Yeah, let's hope some of them realise that they're updating these games for a whole new generation of gamers, as well as gamers that loved them the first time round. But we should get on with the show.
First things first, Hex, can you guess the game for this week? Time for the news, Hex.
ZeniMax, the company that owns Bethesda, has been denied an interim injunction against Minecraft developer Mojang's upcoming game Scrolls. ZeniMax sought to block the use of the name Scrolls, claiming it infringed on the Elder Scrolls copyright. The court ruling in Mojang's favour means that they may continue to use the name unless ZeniMax appeals the decision or goes ahead with a full case. Several Xbox Live users have reported having their accounts hacked by means of remote profile recovery and then used for the purchase of DLC. One user reported finding 5,500 Microsoft points bought on his credit card, all of which were then spent on FIFA 12 content.
Oh, I don't think so!
While Microsoft doesn't believe that Xbox Live has been compromised, suggesting the users were targets of identity theft and phishing, it is currently investigating the matter.
Why? Why?
Mobile and online games may not need to be classified in Australia for the next 2 years if the Classification Amendment Bill is passed by Parliament. Federal Minister for Home Affairs Brendan O'Connor introduced the bill in an effort to ensure that access to mobile and online games is maintained while a review of the National Classification Scheme takes place.
Good game!
The heroes of Might and Magic have been around for over 15 years now, and the game is known for its mix of turn-based strategy as well as world exploration. Few games make it to a 6th installment, but these guys have.
Set 400 years before the last game, demons are rampaging across the land of Ashan, and you'll need to unite a number of factions to fight them back. There's a stack of lore to get your head around with this series, as you'd expect after 6 games, and all that detail really shows in the faction campaigns, even if the voice acting is a little bit dodgy at times.
I recall the heroism of you and your family when demon-worshipping orcs invaded your duchy.
I love how awfully British they are. You'll scrape what information you can from the little text box, but there's also a few cutscenes here and there. Although, Hex, about half the time I didn't know what they were going on about.
I knew those treacherous falcons would try to take my lands. Wolves in my duchy? Infamy!
We should point out that we're not Might and Magic experts, so this was a bit of a learning experience for us, and those tech trees, Hex, they're just so big with so many options. Half the time I'd just be staring at it going, I guess that one?
Yeah, but big tech trees can be fun, and this level of customization lets you really pick and choose your perks according to your playstyle. As you traverse the world map, you'll be fighting enemies for loot and capturing forts to build your own army as you work your way across the land. There are also mercenary units and all sorts of strange creatures you can recruit along the way.
Battles play out on a grid and you'll be taking it in turns with your enemy for attacks. The basic strategy is to keep your healers and ranged at a distance. You'll also be putting friendly units around an enemy in formation.
But you can also take more damage if your enemies are bunched up, so along with all your custom perks, there's a lot to consider. Every now and then in combat, there's a one-on-one animation that plays out, and they're always exciting.
Yeah, they reminded me a little bit of Battle Chess for some reason. Battle Chess, what a great old game. But this is more akin to a unit-based battle system like Fire Emblem, where some units are more effective against others, and you need to be careful about who you pit against whom. We should point out that we've changed all the in-game options to speed up all the animations and the combat here, because they do take quite a while to play out. It's great that you can make combat as fast-paced or as slow and methodical as you like. It's great to have options. You also have the choice for quick combat, which lets you skip most of the battles altogether. Or you can play out every match on the field. The quick combat AI is usually pretty good, and if you think they didn't do a good job, you can just replay it manually afterwards. It's more fun to play every battle out for yourself, of course, but it's nice you can skip the little matches here and there when the outcome is an obvious one. You can also use auto combat and watch the whole battle play out on the field, but we found that sometimes this would fail when quick combat didn't, which was strange.
If you're wondering where the heroes come into play, well, they actually stand off to the side of the battle grid and just command the battle. But they also have abilities or spells that can help influence the outcome, everything from a basic attack to buffs. There's heaps to unlock and experiment with.
You also have a faction ability which charges up as you play out the round, and this can mean life or death for your army, and if your army dies, so does your hero. You can resurrect and rebuild your army, but it's almost always better just to load an old save file.
The game autosaves quite a lot, but this is still definitely a quick save game. You just want to quick save as much as possible.
All the time.
You really want to try and get through battles with as few casualties as possible, or you'll run into trouble later on. the end, it's mostly a numbers game, and managing the weekly output of your units with upgrading your buildings and the location of your heroes in the map can all be quite tricky to get the hang of.
Yeah, and if you take too long to work your way across the map, or if you get sidetracked and attack all little creatures for gear, then you might actually meet an enemy that you can't beat. And this means you may have to restart the whole map, which is so unappealing after you've invested all of that time. And I guess it's just practice, but to me it just felt like the whole game was on a time limit, and I didn't like that.
Yeah, it does add a layer of strategy to the world map though. Newcomers may want to start on easy, although easy is almost boringly simple, so I guess it's just about making that judgment call depending on if you're struggling or not.
That would be useful to have.
There's also a blood and tears morality system within the game that works off your actions. So if, for example, you choose to pursue an enemy instead of letting them go, then you'll fall more on the blood side. We haven't really got far enough to see how this affects the game in a really meaningful way, but there does appear to be a few missions at the end which are either one or the other.
You can take Hero 6 online, but everyone kept locking their games and wouldn't let us in, but we did try hot seat play.
Yes, and get ready for some long waits. A turn-based game like this requires an enormous amount of patience while you're waiting for the other player to do all their business.
Badge, I still think this is one for the fans. The devs have said they've worked alongside the community with this, so maybe if you're a Heroes veteran, then you'll really appreciate some of those subtle changes and the graphical facelift. But the battles are quite fun, and there's some good variety to the factions, and I think this just provides some good strategy gaming, so I'm giving it 7.
When you compare it to something like Civilization 5, it just feels really unpolished. I struggled navigating the world, and the hotkeys do help, but even so, and then there's no tutorial really, just, text boxes. It just wasn't enough to ease me into the game. I did enjoy the battles, but that pressure of having to get to the end of the map or face a restart was just too much for me, so I'm giving it 5.5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Good game.
Last week on the show, we reviewed Batman's latest adventure, Arkham City. Well, this week, we got to meet Batman.
That's right, the man who voiced the classic 90s cartoons and many more, and both games, Kevin Conroy.
Wake up.
Hi Kevin, welcome to Good Game.
Happy to be here.
Because you've been the voice of Batman for so long, do you feel protective over him?
I feel very protective of the character of Batman. When you meet people who have that much invested in the character, you realize I have an enormous responsibility to honor that, and to not let anyone screw around with that. So occasionally when I'm asked to do something that I think is inappropriate, I voice it and I say, Batman wouldn't say that. Batman wouldn't do that.
I didn't need your help.
How is it different when you work on a TV series compared to working on a game like Arkham City?
The difference is dramatic between the shows and the games. In the shows, they always want all the actors in the studio together. And the difference, though, is when you go to the games, they need a completely clean take on everything. So technically, they needed me in the booth alone. And you say each line, go get the gun, go get the gun, go get the gun, go get the gun, go get the gun. They want 5 different readings, and then in each different reading, they want 5 different takes of each of the 5 different readings for each of the lines.
That's not what I wanted to hear.
By the end of the week, you kind of don't know how to speak English anymore. It's like, how do I say, go get the gun? I go get the gun. It just doesn't come out.
At times like these, it's important to keep up appearances.
Mark Hamill has suggested that he's going to finish being the Joker now. If that happens, how will you feel about it?
I would hate it if he stopped doing the Joker, because we do have this, it's like my yin needs his yang. Batman needs Joker. They define each other.
I know I'd want to know just what the hell is going on if I were you.
Do you ever dream about being Batman? Because I would.
I have no distinction between who Kevin Conroy is and who Batman is.
Well, thank you very much for... He is Batman.
Well, there's only one thing better than meeting Batman, and that's getting to keep him. Good Game have been given this amazing life-size statue of the Dark Knight, and we want to give him away to one of you.
But you're gonna have to work for it. What we want you to do is create your very own Batman comic featuring one or more of the Good Game team. It can only be 4 A4-sized pages long, but the rest is up to you.
We'll feature 25 comics of our choosing on the Good Game website, and the one that's the most creative and has the most original story will win this statue all for themselves. Entries close Monday the 14th of November, and we'll announce the winner in our final episode of the year.
Check the website for more details.
Good game.
id Software are the reason the FPS genre is where it is today, and even though Rage wasn't quite the masterpiece we were hoping for, it does show that they can build a technically impressive game engine.
Well, they have been developing games for over 20 years now. Field reporter Goose gives us a closer look at these FPS wizards.
February 1st, 91 was the day that 4 developers from Richardson, Texas came together and registered a little company that would go on to change the game industry as we knew it. These men were John Romero, John Carmack, Tom Hall, and Adrian Carmack. And the company was id Software. Of course, these guys didn't come from nowhere. The genesis of id Software started in the offices of Softdisk, a publisher of game titles that were made available via the distribution of computer magazines. Frustrated with the lack of actual game programming he was doing, John Romero approached the owner of Softdisk and demanded that he work on more actual games rather than simply convert existing programs. With the owner's blessing, John went about assembling a talented young team around him.
This all led to an infamous programming night on September 19th, 1990. This was the night that the guys basically proved that a PC could do what a video game system really was only thought to have been able to do before, which was this ability to have what's called side-scrolling. It's when you have your character and if you run to the edge of the screen, you see the rest of that landscape unfold. This was, of course, the height of awesomeness.
Their testing ground was a hacked version of Super Mario Bros. 3, which they entitled Dangerous Dave in Copyright Infringement, named after a video game character created by Romero himself. When the 4 presented the concept to Nintendo, hoping to sell off the technology, they were politely turned down. However, word of how talented these 4 were quickly spread, and before long, they were contacted by Scott Miller.
Scott Miller was a computer game publisher in Texas. He saw an opportunity to distribute computer games in a way that was different and was unique. And this was through something called shareware. The way it worked is that you would get a portion of the program for free, and if you liked it, then you would buy the rest of it. And this led to the early distribution of Commander Keen.
While Commander Keen was well received and a financial windfall, it was their second IP that really exploded, Wolfenstein 3D. It wasn't long before the team at id were treated like rock gods.
This was, in many respects, a faceless industry. Unlike, say, popular music or sports, there were no celebrities, there were no rock stars of the industry, and these guys really did become that. And that was because of their success. It was also because of the nature of their games, and it was also because of the timing. This story is really about when the computer game underworld really erupted into something more mainstream.
When players got their hands on the original Wolfenstein 3D, they actually found that hacking and creating your own levels was just as much fun as playing the game itself. This then led to one of id Software's most radical ideas, the creation and bundling of modification software with their third title release, Doom.
Carmack and Romero grew up with that kind of hacker ethic. So for them, it was very second nature to say, okay, I want to get inside a computer program and mess with it. When they start making their own games, it was sort of a no-brainer to code them in such a way that they would be extensible. Specifically, within Doom, if you really had the gumption, you know, here were files you could work with so that you could alter the sound, maybe. You could alter the graphics of the game. It was not a popular decision. I mean, there were people within the company on the business side who said this is crazy. But by giving them access, it vested this community.
Not only was it a clever way to embrace the players, but it was also one of the best recruitment processes possible. Now, wannabe programmers and designers could create, distribute, and show off their skills thanks to the accessibility of the internet and these mod tools. One such programmer was Tim Willits.
It was so exciting to to be able to construct these corridors and these rooms and these levels and put monsters in them and have other people play them. I just did it because I could. And I would receive emails from people that said, that's a great level. So it was very encouraging. And I never expected the guys that did software to notice or pay attention. Because in my mind, I thought, well, those guys are somewhere else. Those guys they're not really people. They're just mythical creatures that made awesomeness.
But id's innovations didn't end there. In fact, they had one very bold and brave plan that was going to change the game industry forever.
These guys said, Carmack is creating these unbelievable engines. Why not license them to other people so that people can use them? You know, you had mods, which was giving people certain access for free. Then on a deeper level, you're saying, okay, here's the whole engine. We're gonna license this to you. You can use that to create your whole new game. And that really started happening with the Quake engine. In fact, Valve was one of the early companies to do that and ended up creating Half-Life. They didn't invent the first-person shooter, but what they did was they popularized it and they really made it viable. I mean, id will be remembered as the company that really pioneered the modern first-person shooter.
It is really exciting to see where the first-person game has gone. It has spawned this mega industry.
The game industry has its pantheon of legends and of innovators, and certainly id Software will always be part of that pantheon. When you have that much impact and that much influence, you know, I think people are going to remember what you did.
Good game.
Stiff's name is Glenn Perez, found with a toy rocket ship shoved up his butt.
Suicide.
Ma'am, we need a list of everyone who brought a rocket ship and just pick a frickin' color. We need to see your rocket ship, ma'am. Thanks. Okay, yep. We're looking for Philip Perkins.
That's him.
Get him!
Shit! Hey, it's Zac Efron.
Get out of the way! Why'd you do it, Perkins?
Volleyball club was my dream job. You know how long I waited for that place to open.
Don't take away a man's dream, Shelby. Even a tiny one. Why are you naked?
NBA 2K11 was a super slick sports game that was very hard to fault. So let's see if Visual Concepts can do it again with NBA 2K12.
With NBA 2K12, the excitement is all about the NBA's greatest mode, an in-depth historical look at the basketball legends of days gone by. And where NBA 2K11 threw Michael Jordan's entire career at you, here we'll get to spend some time shooting hoops as some of the other great players.
Yes, there are 15 legends in total. With each providing a career-defining game, we get to control their team. The presentation of these matches is just incredible. We go from the black and white graininess of Bill Russell's Boston Celtics in the 1960s
1 second left. Good.
to the jazzy, muted 80s of Dr. J and Larry Bird, and then into the 90s with Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan.
It feels like stepping back into basketball history. Some of the older games don't even have a three-point line. The sound design is so authentic too. The commentary gives you a lot of information, but with enough energy and pizzazz not to send you to sleep.
Kevin, you can just feel the crowd on pins and needles right now. West sinks it. What a beautiful shot to bring him to within 3.
Unlike last year where you needed to complete specific tasks with Michael Jordan, here all you have to do is beat the other team, which makes it a lot more fun. And once you succeed, all the old teams are unlocked. I think the only thing missing was the ability to play with your friends in this mode, because there's just no way to get that period broadcast feeling when you're using those teams for quick matches.
Russell had the ability to grab a few steals and block shots.
It's not much of a leap forward graphically from last year, but I think it's still been improved and it already looks so good. Some of the player models look better and the animations generally have been smoothed out a bit.
And he's knocked off course by the D. The foul called. He'll shoot free throws.
They've changed the menus this time around though. They're a lot simpler and I don't know why they did that because last year's menus were so great and they were quite a bit snazzier, I thought.
Yeah, they've gone for functionality over style here, and it's funny how something like changing the menus can be, a bit annoying. You know which game has the best menus of all time? MK vs DC. Every time you flick through, big fight plays out in the background. Really cool.
One aspect they did change for the better though was the My Player mode. Instead of slumming it in the development leagues for ages, you'll just play one game before you're drafted. And depending on how you answer the questions in the pre-draft interviews, you can control what team you ultimately play for.
Why should we draft you?
I don't want to waste the first part of my career waiting for the other guys to develop.
There's a nice story element in My Player mode. Once your player starts getting awesome enough, they'll start getting more endorsements and even appear in their own advertisements. Like everything in this game, there's a lot of time that can be spent here in collecting skill points and customizing all your gear.
Yeah, I still think that mode is geared towards the hardcore basketball fans though. I just got so annoyed at all the stuff you couldn't skip through. I even made myself a cup of tea during that whole draft. It just went on forever.
Probably should have played a bit better in the pre-draft game then, eh?
Well, to be fair, I didn't noob it up so much this year with all those settings and sliders, but I still think it's quite a punishing game.
And now
there are no cheap dunks or layups.
With 4 seconds on the clock.
And I feel that there are still a few issues with the passing mechanic. It's really hard to pass to your inside player, and I think the AI somehow always anticipates the passes.
The frustrating thing is you've seen the real players make all of these passes, but here just time and time again, you lose the ball. It penalizes you for being imprecise about your passes, and sometimes even your own players work against you, making these awkward, slow lobs.
Yeah, and the AI here is really tough. You have to really learn the game of basketball and call plays and move the ball well. But unlike 2K11, this year's game has a very comprehensive training mode, which I definitely appreciated. In fact, possibly one of the best I've seen for a sports title. It takes you through all the moves and controls you'll ever need for the game. And also great for those just wanting to brush up on their skills. What's your overall impression, Batch?
Well, I think if you're a basketball purist, then that greatest mode is just going to be the greatest for you, and you'll have a wonderful time here. And it's such a slick and polished game, so I'm giving it 9 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Well, I think it's definitely one of the most comprehensive sports games out there, and it may be a little bit too dense for casual players, but if you're a fan, then you definitely shouldn't miss this, so I'm giving it 9 as well.
We spoke to developer Rob Jones from Visual Concepts about how the NBA lockout affected NBA 2K12, amongst other things, and you can see that full interview on the website. So, did you guess the game for this week?
It was the 2004 PC game Armies of Exego, an RTS that challenged players to fend off their enemies on multiple fronts, both above and below the ground. A bit of multitasking mayhem. It was also developed by Black Hole Entertainment, who made Might and Magic Heroes 6.
Next week, we bring you our massive review of Battlefield 3 Jets.
It's not Battlefield 3 Jets.
Battlefield 3 Jets Combat.
Oh no! Fucking computer halted.
And Nathan Drake returns for Adventure in Uncharted 3. Once again, thanks to everyone who live tweeted with us, and we'll see you again next week. Hex out.
Bajo out. Excuse me for a moment.
Please don't do anything gross. We have to give that away, it's a prize.
Never leave me.
This is getting awkward.
For you.